alaikum, dear viewers, welcome to our new episode. It is our second episode about atheism series. In this episode, we will try our best to logically prove that how atheism is against the human nature. Before starting video, we are very thankful to the great Islamic scholar Mr Daniel Haqqiqatjou, from whom we learned much about the awful reality of atheism. May Allah Almighty bless him. Now, let's start the episode. Firstly, we have to understand that what is human nature? Humans are born with a heart, a brain, 2 eyes, 2 hands. But we are also born with certain inbuilt emotions, instincts, the reactions that are genetically acquired by animals including humans, behaviors, desires, and intuitions. Why do you salivate when looking at a delicious meal? Why do you feel cleansed with water? Why are you repulsed by rotting flesh? Why do you want to hug and embrace loved ones? Are these things you learned from your culture? Not at all. These are natural reactions that all humans have. But beyond reactions and feelings, we also have natural intuitions. An intuition is a belief that you don't necessarily know you have. But how is that possible? How can you have beliefs that you are not consciously aware of? Imagine a little girl playing on a swing and a boy roughly pushes her off. What do you think about such an action? We all have a strong intuitive belief that the boy did something wrong. But where did that intuition come from? Did you have strong beliefs in your mind specifically about little boys pushing little girls off of swings? Probably not. You might think that your expectation about this experience, about this action, is based on lifetime experiences. But psychologists have done these experiments with infants. They show young children a boy stealing an apple. Then the boy walks on a bridge that collapses. They ask the children, why did the bridge collapse? And the children overwhelmingly agree that it was because the boy stole the apple. These children come from a variety of religious and non-religious backgrounds, and none of them would even be able to articulate the belief that somehow morality can affect physical events like the collapse of a bridge. Nonetheless, they all share this intuition. It is said that there are no atheists in a foxhole, a small hole that soldiers dig as a shelter from the enemy. This is because, in the heat of war, the atheist relies on his intuitions that God exists and can help him. So he calls out reflexively. Similarly for the atheist at sea. When the dark storm blows, tall waves batter his ship, and the watery grave signals, the sailor cries out, "Oh God, save me." This is not because the atheist sailor consciously believed in God all along but kept it secret. Rather, the belief in God is a deep human intuition that is not always conscious but can nonetheless manifest itself in extreme situations. People have hundreds and thousands of unconscious intuitions about everything. But is it true that all people are born with this intuition about the existence of God? Despite the oppressive power of secularism, a surprising 80 to 90% of all human beings on the planet today still believe in God. Not only that, but people across all developed cultures historically have a virtually identical concept of God. Yes, most religions are polytheistic, believe in more than one God, but except for a minority of small hunter and gatherer tribes, all civilizations, even the polytheistic ones, believed in a singular all-powerful God. Justin Barrett, the American psychologist, lists the primary characteristics of this universal notion of God. He is the all-knowing, all-powerful supreme being responsible for the creation of the universe. He has a mind, has a will, and is immortal. He controls the past, present, and future. He created the universe for a purpose and has set a moral order. He communicates with people and rewards or punishes them. But he doesn't have a body and is invisible. How is it possible that so many people from so many different parts of the globe and at different times in history not only independently came to the same conclusion about the existence of God but also agree on the primary attributes of God? It would be impossible for such alignment to arise purely by chance. The answer is human nature. Humans naturally are born with an intuitive God concept. Belief in God is ingrained in us as a species. It is a part of what makes us human. What makes the God concept so naturally compelling to the human mind is that it is interconnected with other deep human intuitions about the world. Causation is one example. From early childhood, we intuitively believe that nothing occurs without reason. Everything has a cause. And causes have their own causes and so on, in a causal chain. Anyone who's talked to children has experienced this firsthand. Your child asks you, "Why does it rain?" You reply, "Because the clouds release stored water." But why does that happen? Because the sun heats up water that turns it into steam that forms clouds. But why? Unless it's stopped, this questioning would continue indefinitely. We are born with this natural intuition to seek out ultimate causal ends. This intuition about causation supports the notion of a supreme being, which is why many religions independently produced cosmological arguments, an argument for the existence of God that claims that all things in nature depend on something else for their existence, and that the whole cosmos must therefore itself depend on a being which exists independently or necessarily. As proof for the existence of God, one ultimate cause is necessary to explain the existence of the universe. Humans also have innate intuitions about order and design. From childhood, we innately believe objects around us are purposefully created. When children in studies are asked about the origins of natural things like plants, animals, and mountains, they recognize that these things are not man-made but were made for a purpose. For example, flowers were made to make the world beautiful, puppies were made to play with children, etc. How can something both be made for a purpose but not be man-made? For children, the answer is obvious: God made it. Olivera Petrovich, the Oxford researcher, tested Japanese and British children from ages 4 to 7 by showing them photos of natural objects and man-made objects. When the children were then asked questions about the origins of natural objects like mountains and animals, regardless of cultural or religious background, the children predominantly chose God as the answer. They did not give an agnostic answer like nobody knows or an incorrect answer like by people. Petrovich called this result absolutely extraordinary because the Japanese Shinto religion doesn't include this idea of God creating anything. So how do Japanese children get the idea that creation is in God's hands when their religion and culture has no such teaching? Atheists claim that belief in God is ridiculous. Famous atheists like Richard Dawkins claim that believing in God is like believing in a flying spaghetti monster. Dawkins explains that, if religious people want to know why atheists don't believe in God, they should just reflect on why they themselves don't believe in something as silly as the flying spaghetti monster. But these atheists have simply committed the strawman fallacy. It is the attempt of misrepresenting someone's argument. No one naturally believes or is inclined to believe in the flying spaghetti monster. But, as study after study proves, people do have a strong natural tendency to believe in God. Why aren't atheists able to acknowledge this established fact? Why do they have to resort to straw man? Are they scared? Atheists might be dismissive and say, so what if we have natural intuitions about God? Such intuitions are merely the byproducts of evolution and, therefore, have no basis in reality. But the atheists making this argument should quickly realize their mistake. According to them, all our intuitions must be the products of evolution. So applying their same logic, none of our intuitions have a basis in reality. But to put it bluntly, that's insane. Because, in addition to intuitions about God, we are born with intuitions about logic, math, counting, ethics, and even intuitions about the nature of space and time. So according to atheists, all of these intuitions are just a product of blind evolution, which would mean none of them have a basis in reality, which would mean none of them can be trusted, which would mean the human mind itself can't be trusted. The atheist might respond to this by saying that, unlike intuitions about God, those other intuitions like logical, empirical, and ethical intuitions are established on solid rational grounds. Well, let's just test that. A basic ethical intuition that all humans share is, harming others for no reason is wrong. Atheists endorse this belief, but why? Imagine someone who questions this. Imagine someone who says, there is no scientific or rational evidence proving that harming others is wrong. Only brainwashed nuts would believe that harming others is wrong. Such myths are nothing more than the byproducts of evolution. What could the atheist say to such skeptics? What empirical facts would prove that harming others is wrong? All the atheists could say is that these are just fundamental beliefs, or we have to accept them axiomatically, accepting something without proof, or the beliefs are valid because they agree with our intuitions, or these are things we all just know. But all of these things could also be said about the natural intuitiveness of God. So, by trashing intuitions about God, the atheist also has to trash intuitions about everything else, including logical, empirical, and ethical intuitions, which are at the foundation of science, math, and secular ethics. Atheism thus becomes a self-defeating proposition. Can you be a good person without believing in God? Atheists often claim that their atheism is not a set of beliefs. Rather, atheism is a mode of thinking, namely scientific and analytic thinking. The analytic mind realizes that there is no scientific evidence for God, therefore belief in God is irrational. Atheists say that such reasoning about God has nothing to do with morality. To understand this, we need to define two contrasting modes of thought: analytic thinking versus intuitive thinking. Our default mode of cognition, the mental action or process of acquiring knowledge and understanding through thought, experience, and the senses, is intuitive. Intuitive thinking is automatic and is driven by deep psychological mechanisms we are born with. When a person feels that he should help his ill mother, that is an intuitive mode of thinking. When a sailor lost at sea calls to God to save him, that is also intuitive thinking, grounded in the universal intuition that God exists. Analytic thinking, in contrast, is not automatic and easy. Analytic thinking requires concentration. It is used to solve complex problems and analyze situations. The atheist tells us that analytic thought is the only way to understand the world and the only way to arrive at truths, whereas intuitions are nothing but bias. But recent cognitive science and psychological studies have shown that overdeveloping the analytic parts of our cognitive faculties can greatly diminish not only our religious intuitions but also moral intuitions. World-renowned psychologists and researchers like Jonathan Haidt, pronounced Haidt, and Joseph Heinrich explain that high analytical thought is correlated with less of what's called deontological morality. Morality generally falls under two categories: consequentialist versus deontological. Consequentialist morality focuses on consequences and calculating how to maximize pleasure and reduce harm for the most number of people. This makes consequentialist morality very analytic in nature. Deontological morality, however, is much more intuitive and relies on gut feelings and innate ethical tendencies, such as care for family, feelings of disgust or reverence, respect for authority, and loyalty to one's tribe. To better understand the contrast between consequentialist and deontological morality, consider this scenario. A man goes to the supermarket once a week and buys a dead chicken. But before cooking the chicken, he has sexual intercourse with it. Then he thoroughly cooks it and eats it. Is there anything morally wrong with his actions? Purely on the basis of consequentialist morality, there would be nothing wrong with this since there is no harm and, in fact, the man increases his overall pleasure, so it might even be an ethically good action. But deontological intuitions tell us that such an act is awful, it is disrespectful, it violates dignity, and therefore is highly immoral. The surprising thing is that when people are asked about this chicken scenario, those who have a Western secular education are far more likely to find nothing objectionable to it. This overemphasis on analytic thinking is exactly what atheist psychology is all about. And if you asked, you might be surprised that many atheists would find nothing wrong with copulating with a dead chicken and then eating it. It is not a coincidence that many popular atheists have openly stated that they have no moral objections to incest and other victimless crimes that most people of the world consider unspeakably evil. What we must realize is that healthy human relations are fundamentally deontological. For example, a son might have a lot to gain by frequently lying to his father. But he doesn't do that because lying, especially when directed to one's parents, is morally wrong. A mother could greatly enjoy life if she gave up her baby to a foster family, but she doesn't do that because her strong maternal intuitions tell her not to abandon her child regardless of the massive increase in freedom she could enjoy. All relationships require a healthy sense of deontological intuition, but this is precisely what a hyperactive analytic psychology destroys. The analytic mind favors consequentialism, and consequentialism says the only thing that matters is maximizing pleasure and personal happiness, basically pumping dopamine into the brain. But sometimes maximizing that dopamine requires lying, cheating, cutting off family, betraying your community, engaging in the taboo. So when atheists promote analytic thought, they are not only burying natural human intuitions about God, they are also sabotaging all organic human relationships. Psychologist Jonathan Haidt, who is a committed atheist himself, as well as others, have published numerous studies on how atheists are less charitable, less generous to family, less loyal to community, more willing to justify lying and cheating for material gain, more willing to engage in infidelity, and much more. Atheists might claim that atheism is solely about the non-existence of God, but that's not true. Atheism is an integrated psychology that is strongly correlated with an ultra-consequentialism. Atheism is destroying family values, basic human values, thus it is an evil to the humanity. We have to recognize and fight with this bullshit of atheism. So dear viewers, be a man of God, worship to God, make a strong connection with Him. He is all powerful. Viewers, please study Islam and make yourself able to defend Islam. It will be your real success in this world and hereafter. No doubt it will also give pleasure to our leader, teacher Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So that's the end of today's episode. In our incoming episodes we will try our best to answer the most common and dominant atheistic questions. Don't forget to subscribe the channel.